My inner being knows my kids are stable. My inner being knows that they have an inner being. My inner being knows that they're going to be just fine. My inner being knows that they are flexible. My inner being knows that I love them. My inner being knows that my kids know that I love them. My inner being knows that their mother loves them. When you really ask the question, what does your inner being know? You'll keep coming to those awarenesses that this is not a terrible thing that's happening. This is a thing that's happening, that you can find a way. We like to say, and we mean this regarding everything, and we especially mean it regarding this: make a decision and then line up with it. So let's say that the decision has been made by both of you, has it? That this divorce is going to happen. Yeah?
I would say that for one of us more than the other, and I don't know, and the one of us is me, that is leaving for a lot of reasons.
So spend no time justifying it, because your inner being isn't doing that. And every minute you spend justifying why you're leaving, then you hold yourself out of whack. So make a decision, sounds like you have, and then line up with it. But you've made a decision that you're not lined up with. You've made a decision that you're not really lined up with. You've decided it's going to happen, but you're not lined up with it. And by lined up with it, we mean you're seeing the positive aspects of it. Now, does that sound weird to you? Does it sound weird that someone would be calling a breaking up of a relationship with children involved, even acknowledge that there are positive aspects in it? Well, what's the alternative? My children are dependent upon the two of us being together forever and ever and ever. That's bogus. My kids' happiness depends on how I feel about someone else and how that other person feels about me. That's bogus.
I've had to do a lot of reconciling between because my parents were divorced, and so were hers, and so it's like the belief system that we created about what that means for us growing up, I guess. I projected that.
This is a room full of people, and we meet rooms full of people all around the world that are recovering from those old beliefs. In other words, so many beliefs of dependency. When there is an encouragement of dependency on other humans, that gets off on the wrong foot right from the beginning, because what it says is everybody's got to live out their full life, and nobody better die until I'm done needing you, and don't take your attention away from me, and don't be excited about anything else other than me. There is nothing about that is in vibrational alignment with what any one of you came into this life experience to live. Your children, when they are born, they're saying, yay, I get to come into this life experience and figure out my own way. And then they get here and their parents say, I will decide everything for you. And as soon as they're able to understand that, they begin balking at that. You're not the boss of me. I don't have to do what you say. You can beat them into submission, both emotionally and otherwise in time, but everything about who they are goes against the notion that you have a responsibility to join forces with some other person for any other reason other than to give them an avenue into this physical life experience. It helps that the two of you got together. That doesn't mean that they're not loving families and loving relationships, but having a divorce doesn't mean that they're not still loving families and loving relationships. And the thing that will be most detrimental to your children is if you decide that you have to defend your impulse or your desire by pushing against something else, by explaining, I had to do this because of this, this, and this. You said, for a lot of reasons. Well, let those reasons evaporate as quickly as you can. In other words, think in terms of what you're moving to, not what you're moving from. And most of all, try to see those involved through the eyes of Source. Let's chew on this just a little more. There's something sort of humanly satisfying to feel really needed. To feel needed in a relationship, to feel needed as a mentor or as a parent, but it fosters a dependency that in time will be the basis of true friction. Because when you feel needed and it feels good to be needed, and so you attract someone who likes to need, then what happens is pretty soon nobody feels free in that, and everybody's blaming each other for it. And so your most natural instincts are those of independence. Independence from needing other humans and having a relationship with the whole of who you really are, you see. And so Oh, it is such a wonderful thing to watch your children, and you will watch them. There will be a time, and not so far from now, that you will acknowledge this was good for them in these ways, in this way and this way and this way and this way and this way. We're just going to throw some questions out to all of you and see how you're doing with this, because we can feel confusion in the room. We get why. So which feels better to you from the core of who you are? People who are dependent on you, or people who have found their own autonomy and connection? Which feels better? It's clear to you, isn't it? Which feels better, to be wanted and needed? Let's see if we can pose this in a way that will really break some things loose within you. Which feels better, to be needed and wanted, because we're not making too much separation between those two, between being needed and wanted and being loved? Which feels better, to need or to love? Which feels better, to expect a positive outcome or expect a negative outcome? Which feels better, to see weakness or to see strength? Which feels better, to see stability or to see instability? You know from your own life experiences what feels best to you. So when you stumble on a thought that's fostered from a belief, and some of those beliefs go way back, and you feel discord, just stop and say, what is this discord about? And what will come to your mind, if you're in the vicinity of alignment, what will come to your mind is, the reason it feels like this is because this is an old belief. This is a belief that is fostered by a world that wants to encourage dependency for the small satisfaction that there is in being needed. What a big price you've been paying for that small satisfaction in being needed. Do you really want your children to need you, or do you want them to stand strong and just adore life, adore their life, adore you, adore their mother? In other words, don't you want that? And none of that's on the table. This is not either or. Stay and ruin their lives, or go and ruin their lives. You're not in charge of whether they have a good life or whether they don't have a good life. You're in charge of whether you do, and you teach by the clarity of your example. So if you make a decision that you're going to go, and then you go and you feel guilty, or you go and you worry about them, then what example are you offering? But if you go and you stay in alignment, and you go and you still love yourself, and you go and you still love their mother, and you go and you still love them, what example are you setting? There are a lot of people that use love to control. There are a lot of people that use relationships to control. And they don't really mean to do it that way. It's just sort of, they don't know what else to do. But when you've tasted the sweet nectar of alignment, of really loving you, friends, you've got yourselves in quite a bind, because so many people around you have different ideas of how you should live. So you know what you become? You become guarded and deceptive. You pretend that you are different than you are, so that you don't upset anybody's apple cart, and so that it doesn't come back on you. But when you are tuned in, tapped in, turned on, and you're in love with life, and you've got source energy flowing through you, and your timing is such that you just say the right thing at the right time, and you feel good, and you rendezvous with those who are in harmony with you, you live happily ever after. And it's their job to do the same for them. You cannot get sick enough to help sick people get well, and you cannot get poor enough to help poor people become prosperous, and you cannot become confused enough to help confused people find clarity. You cannot become unhappy enough to help unhappy people become happy. All you can do is tune to the fullness of who you are and radiate that outward, and those who want some of that will gravitate to you, and those who are in some other vibrational thing will gravitate from you. It's not your job to uplift the world. It's your job to uplift yourself. And in doing so, others who are in the vicinity will be uplifted also, you see. Yeah. We think it is an interesting thing that humans, you put yourself in boxes and you say, this is the box of happiness. Let's call it marriage. And this is the box of unhappiness. So this is the way we would like you to look at this from now on. So here is all of humanity. And humanity is sometimes deliberately and knowingly, but mostly accidentally and by default. They have defined themselves in different categories. So there's Republicans and Democrats, and there's gay people and straight people, and there's married people and single people, and there's every distinction that you can imagine. There are piles of people, and they get together in their piles, and they feel self-righteous about the pile that they've defined and critical of almost all the other piles. And then you bang around with each other and say, isn't life interesting? And we say, we only see two piles. Those under the influence of source right now in this minute, and those under the influence of something else right this minute. And every pile has some of each in it. And so if you just decide that you're going to be tuned in, tapped in, turned on, regardless of married or divorced, or regardless of this or that or the other, if you decide that you're going to be all that you are, the law of attraction will bring to you, because of the consistent vibration that you are emitting, what's a vibrational match to you, you see. And you can stop the futile, pretentious hypocrisy of pretending to be a whole lot of things that you have never wanted to be for the sake of those who haven't figured out how to make their own life work. Yeah. And by that we pretty much mean all other people. All other people. It's their job to be happy, and it's not your job to perform in a way that makes them happy. And freedom comes from only that understanding. You're so free you can choose bondage. You're so free you can choose a thought that aligns you or a thought that causes a tug of war within you. But you will never find a philosophy or a way of life that is offered by any group of people that as you follow it right down the line, it will bring you utter happiness. There is nothing like that. That's not what you came for. You didn't say, I'll come into physical experience and I'll figure out who's right and wrong, and I'll join the groups that's right and condemn the groups that are wrong. People act like that's what their assignment was, but it's certainly not what they intended. You came to live happily ever after. You intended to let life show you what you want for now. And you intended to line up with that and find the fullness of that and let those thoughts turn to things while you define more and more and more. You're in a constant state of becoming. And unless you allow yourself to become, you will never feel satisfied. And almost everyone will resent every single person that they feel is holding them back. Do you know? I'm going to say it again. How you doing out there, by the way? Satisfaction comes from only one place. Satisfaction comes from having an intention and moving in the direction of it. And so you could not get together in a focus group and talk about what you should or shouldn't do and then take the consensus and decide that that's what you're going to do. That would not bring you satisfaction. It would bring you deprivation, and it would bring you eventual resentment.
Yeah. And I feel that too, because, you know, I made that decision out of a space of complete alignment, and then got out of alignment when I started listening to the focus group.
Yeah. You know, this is going to sound strange to you in this context, but it's what we call buyer's remorse. So buyer's remorse is this. You're all frisky and tuned in. You're having a wonderful day. You see something you want and you move in the direction of it and you say yes to it. And then you get out of the vortex, you get back into the humdrum of work, you start feeling the deprivation of enough, and you lose it. And buyer's remorse is you were in alignment, and that's why it seemed like a good idea, and now you're not in alignment, and that's why it sounds like not a good idea. And it's hard because the peanut gallery wants to define what's right or wrong for you to want, and they don't get to do that. Which brings you around to the most significant thing that someone who's decided to live happily ever after will have to come to know. And that is, you have to give up on caring whether other people get you or not. Because other people are so diverse that they can't all get you. And then how do you decide which ones you want to get you? And then you have to analyze them to see if they're worth you letting them get you. And then you run around from group to group trying to decide if you've given yourself over to a group that's asking. It's an impossible situation. Or you can be who you are and line up with who you are and radiate your clarity and love and appreciation of life to anyone who gets near you. And those who aren't ready for that, they'll bounce the other way. They will.